In my childhood, I was a troubled kid. I stole from stores and relatives, cursed, and threw things at random passersby on the street. I started smoking at 12 and didn't care about anyone except my friends. They were my real family, or so I thought. The five of us caused trouble every single day. My parents, although I later claimed they should have been stricter with discipline, weren't to blame for this. I was just a wayward child. I thought all these actions made me cool. I can't describe the sense of superiority I felt when I made adults fear me. It gave me a feeling of power, control, something I craved when I was younger. I could go on about my misdeeds, but the point is I was just out of control. I made amends as best I could to those I could, but we're not here for my self-flagellation. We're here for revenge. In short, when I was 16, my parents finally lost their patience. And despite all my tantrums, screams, and even physically lashing out at my father, they decided to send me to a school for troubled teens. I call it a school, but it was actually a military-style institution where discipline was drilled into us by the harshest and most effective methods, alongside a few lessons in literacy and math. Without going into detail, I'll say that this school changed me. Though I was aggressive, cruel, arrogant, and nearly suicidal when I was first left at the door, the people at the camp broke me. I spent just over a year there. No phone calls, no visits home, no access to the outside world. For a whole year, this camp and these counselors, these real tough men, taught me what a piece of trash I truly was. By the end of the second summer, I had changed. I fought, screamed, and got my butt kicked more times than I could count, but ultimately I was defeated. These people taught me that real men don't behave the way I did, and that the path I was on would lead me either to prison or to the grave. They were brutally honest, especially Counselor Jay. By the end of my sentence, I considered Jay a second father. Though I initially hated him for making me feel worthless, he did me a service by opening my eyes to how toxic my behavior was. To this day, I regard him as a kind of hero. He was the main person who thought I was ready to go home. But the backstory is getting long, so let's get to the story. When I returned home, I had transformed from a cruel little brat into a somewhat civilized young man, ready for my final year of high school. I was nervous about going back, having adapted to the disciplined school life, but I was also excited. I missed my friends and hoped they would welcome me back, even though I hadn't spoken to any of them for over a year. And to my relief, they welcomed me with open arms. One of my closest friends had moved to another state during my absence, but the other three were thrilled to see me. Over the next few weeks, I settled in and didn't spend much time with them outside of school. My parents were testing how much I had matured since coming back and set boundaries on when I could leave the house, how long I could be out, where I could go, etc. I was determined to prove to them that I was no longer the little jerk who had made their lives miserable for all those years. So I followed their rules and only saw my friends at school. All of this is relevant because of what happened next. I joined the school football team, which included all three friends, and one evening after practice, all the team members were in the locker room, sweaty and dirty but pleased with themselves. I was laughing and chatting with my three best friends so much that I didn't notice we were the only ones left in the room. And that's when the conversation took a bad turn. One of the friends, for simplicity I'll call him F1, friend 1, started telling me about a college party they were all planning to go to and how they had been going to college parties for months because it was easy to get girls and booze. I was doubtful because I didn't think mom and dad would let me go. But then F1 started talking about the girl he was planning to invite. She went to the same school as us, but she wasn't the girl I thought F1 had any real relationship with. I knew of her, but wasn't friends with her. He started telling the rest of the friends and me how he had been trying to get her into bed for a long time, but she kept making excuses, so he planned to take her to the party and finally get her. When I jokingly asked him, "Why are you so sure she won't turn you down again?" he looked me straight in the eye and said, as casually as possible, the most chilling phrase I had ever heard in my life. "I'll just slip something into her drink. It'll relax her, and there won't be any problems." At first, I just laughed awkwardly, thinking it was some messed up joke, but they didn't laugh with me. When I asked him if he was serious, F1 said he was tired of her messing games, that she was just leading him on, and that the pills would just make things easier. I couldn't believe my ears. I quickly distanced myself from the conversation and rushed home, probably running through several stop signs, but I don't remember. All night, I tried to convince myself that my friends were just joking around. A few more days passed and the locker room conversation was almost forgotten, though they wouldn't shut up about the party and kept insisting I sneak out and join them. I was called a wimp multiple times for refusing because of my parents, but I brushed it off. Then the crap finally hit the fan. During another after-school practice, we were the last ones in the locker room again, and F1 did something I wouldn't have expected in 1,000 years. All three had been talking about the party this whole time, and then F1 started rummaging through his gym bag. He told us to check this out and tossed F2 a small baggie with little pink pills. And just like that, I felt the blood drain from my face, and it was like a bomb went off in my head, and a voice in my mind screamed, "Holy crap, this is really happening. This is serious." It's hard to describe what I felt as F1 started detailing how he planned to invite the girl to the party, slip something into her drink, and use one of the frat guys' bedrooms for a few hours. I felt sick. I literally could have puked all over the floor listening to all three of them talk about how awesome the party was going to be after they had just described how they planned to rape a girl. I couldn't take it and ran out again. That night, I actually did throw up, replaying over and over in my head what I had just witnessed. I could hardly believe it. These three boys had been my friends for 15 years. I considered them my family, thought I knew them better than anyone else, but 1 year apart in this? Let me tell you, that night I actually cried. I'm not ashamed to admit it. What I am ashamed of is how long it took me to get a grip and deal with it. I knew I should have told someone, but for some stupid reason, I was still loyal to them. Don't crucify me for this. I know now what I should have done, but I was 17 and these were my best friends. I didn't want them to get in trouble, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't let this slide. So instead of telling an adult like a normal person, I decided to handle it myself. I went to F1 and told him not to do what he was planning. I told him it was stupid and dangerous, that it would ruin his life and the life of the girl he was planning to drug. He didn't even blink. He looked me straight in the face and said that the school they sent me to had turned me into a wimp, that he hated how much I had changed and had been trying to bring me back with the help of F2 and F3. He even told me what they had been saying behind my back and how they planned to set me up with the girl after F1 was done with her to show me what I was missing out on. Then he said something I will never forget. He said to me, word for word, "I'm doing this little girl a favor. She's a freaking virgin. And after this party, your mom won't be the only one who finally gets some." I hit him. We fought, and both of us were sent home for fighting. I couldn't believe it. I was furious. My best friend said that to me. My best friend told me he was going to rape an innocent girl at a party, and I was a wimp for not wanting to join in. I was disgusted. I was disgusted to my core, and I was done with him. My parents were disappointed that I had been suspended so soon after coming home, but I just sat quietly as my mom cried and my dad yelled at me. Now, I realized I should have told him, but after what F1 said to me, a crazy idea had formed in my head that I needed to handle it myself. And now for the revenge. After a weekend of being grounded, I went back to school and immediately sought out F1. He was as banged up as I was, but had a nice shiner under his eye from my punch. F2 and F3 were standing next to him, and all three stared at me as I approached. Then I did something that made me sick. I apologized to him. I told him I was sorry for hitting him and that he was right. I had changed, and I hated what that school had done to me, and I wanted to be the old me again. Surprisingly, they all bought it. F1 and I even hugged, and the cherry on top was that I promised them I would go to the party. And now, for my stupid teenage plan, first I started recording them when we were alone. I wanted to get on tape everything they said about the party and the girl they planned to rape. I knew I needed some kind of evidence, or it would just be my word against theirs. And after a few days, I had recorded more than enough. But I wasn't done yet. No, my stupid self had a plan and I was going to see it through. So I sought out the girl, pulled her aside, and told her everything. She was furious and scared, but I begged her not to go to the police or tell anyone. Now, I realized that was also stupid, but for some reason she listened to me. I had a plan, a crazy, stupid plan to teach them all a lesson. I told her to tell F1 she would meet him at the party, but to stay home to be safe. Later that day, F1 started bragging that the girl had accepted his invitation and everything was going as planned. And there I sat, halfway pulling my phone out of my pocket, recording it all. Finally, the night of the party came and I snuck out because, I was grounded. I think it's worth noting that the whole night, I wasn't filled with guilt and self-righteousness. I doubted myself, but in some strange way, I felt betrayed. These three guys had been my brothers before I even learned to fight, and I felt betrayed that they had gone down this path. Even more, I was haunted by the thought that I could have been just like them if my parents hadn't sent me away. It was a strange moment of realization in the middle of a packed frat house, surrounded by drunk idiots, but you take what life throws at you. The night went on, and F1 got more and more upset that the girl he had invited never showed up. I tried to keep him in my sight all night, not wanting him to decide that any girl would do if he couldn't get the one he wanted. I kept my eyes on them as they got drunk, and I stayed as sober as possible with water in a beer can. By midnight, all three were wasted, and I knew that by this point, all the girls at the party were safe. By this time, the crowd had thinned out, and several people who couldn't stand were passed out all over the house. Now it was my time to shine. While all three were occupied with a drinking game, I rummaged through F1's bag and found the baggie of little pink pills. Here's where I did something I'm not particularly proud of, but I'll tell you anyway. I slipped one pill into each of 3 beer bottles and handed them to my friends, then waited. It didn't take long, and all 3 were passed out on the floor like many other party guests. Then I pulled out a black permanent marker from my bag and wrote rapist on all 3 of their foreheads, took a picture, and immediately uploaded it to our school's Facebook page for everyone who went there to see. Admittedly, I didn't think this part through very well, as not only did I do this in front of all the people at the party who were still conscious, but I also knew the pictures wouldn't last long on the school site before they were taken down. But since it was a small school in a small town, I had no doubt that a bunch of people would see it before a teacher took the pictures down, and that's exactly what I wanted. Next came the recordings. When I got home, my parents gave me a verbal lashing for sneaking out, but they stopped when I finally told them what had been going on. They were both shocked and didn't fully believe it, but when I played them both recordings on my phone, they felt the same disgust I did. I sat quietly in the car as my dad drove me to the police station, lecturing me about how I should have just come to him and that what I did at the party was unnecessary. But at the time, it seemed like it was. My phone was already blowing up with comments from students, commenting on the pictures of my 3 former friends with rapist written on their foreheads. And while many were just laughing at them, many were wondering if there was any truth to it. That's what I wanted. I wanted everyone to know who they really were, so they had nowhere to hide. The hours spent at the police station were, admittedly, very scary. I still doubted if I had done the right thing, but my friends had chosen their fate. I was still hurt and angry that they had let themselves become that way, and though I felt a little guilty for possibly ruining their futures, I had done what I needed to do. In the end, the recordings were enough to charge all of them with conspiracy to commit a crime. Since the name of the girl F1 had planned to drug was mentioned, her parents, understandably, were furious and demanded that all three of my former friends be arrested. I would have been arrested if the girl hadn't told her parents in the court that I had warned her to stay away from F1 and the party. I was charged with possession of a controlled substance since I admitted to using the pills against my former friends, and with assault since the permanent marker was considered a form of attack. But luckily, I didn't get any jail time. However, I did get a lot of community service. All three were tried as adults for attempted rape, but only F1 got actual jail time since he was the one who got the pills and the only one who admitted to wanting to use them. The other two only got probation and community service for aiding, but in our town, they were completely shunned. No one ever let them forget. I was prepared for backlash, prepared for them to come after me or something, but strangely, I think F1 going to jail for what he did scared them both straight, and they smartened up enough to get into college without football scholarships since they were both kicked off the team. They never came near me again, which surprised me, but I didn't care anymore. My friends had been dead to me long before any of this happened, and by the time I moved away for college, it was all behind me. Now I'm in my final year of college and still sometimes think about those three. I think about how if my parents hadn't sent me to that special school, I could have been just like them. Strangely, I sometimes miss them, but I know I'm missing the kids they were, not who they became. I constantly thank my parents for sending me to that school, and even got praise from Jay when I finally got the courage to tell him what had happened. I don't know what will happen to F1 when he gets out of jail, but part of me hopes he learns his lesson and lives on like I have. Jay called me a few days ago just to check in, and I told him the whole story, and that's why I'm telling it on the internet now. I guess the moral is to stand up to your friends when you know they're doing wrong, but maybe not in the stupid way I did. Always involve other, more qualified people to handle situations you're unsure about. Even if you're a stubborn as hell teenager who thinks they know everything,